What is up, everyone? And welcome back to another episode of the Summit Sports Podcast. My name is Chris, and I'm joined by two greats in this industry. Jurgen and Dane, fellas, how are we this week?
I'm doing good as always. Boys, it's recording day. Another week of work done for me because ironically we record this on one of my days off. So I'm hyped. I'm ready. We're here to talk more sports 1 week after one of our biggest episodes yet. We have big news to cover this week and I'm excited.
I'm doing good as well. Lately, there's been optimism about an MLB deal. We might have breaking news while we're on the show today. We'll see about that. Fingers crossed. But overall, I'm doing pretty well.
Okay, well, it's nice to know that everyone's in good spirits. But over this past week, there was some bombshell news that occurred, but in the NFL world, and we'll talk about that. However, as we do, we start off with the great, the Jurg. The Jurg. We need a nickname for you. We need the Jurg, like the Rock, but we need
I
the
I
Jurg.
mean I mean we could use the nickname the OTBN crew gave me, Iceman.
Iceman. Okay, I like that. Iceman. Okay, so Iceman Jurg, like you always beautifully do, you start us off hot with NHL news. And what do you got for us this week? Talk to me.
So, continuing from the NHL trade deadline, kind of preview I started last week with giving 6 teams that I felt need to make a move in terms of being buyers at the deadline. I'm now going to follow it up with 6 teams that I have here that should be sellers at the deadline, and it can kind of coincide in a couple of the players and positions I'm going to talk about with these teams. I'm going to go as brief as I can, with some teams getting a little bit more detailed than others, particularly the last team I'm going to cover. But let's get through the rest first before we get to the really good stuff. Uh, first and foremost, I should say, I'm going to start with the East because I actually, unlike last week where I had 3 versus 3 East West, I actually only have 2 in the East this week because a couple of teams in the East, I just looked at their rosters and I don't know how many pieces they'd be willing to trade. I look at teams like the New Jersey Devils and the Ottawa Senators, and Ottawa just has a lot of young guys this year, which I don't think they would want to part ways with a lot of their young guys. And it's kind of the same thing with New Jersey. I feel like a lot of the pieces that are on the team now, I think they want to make things work, aside from like a few players here or there, but no major names on either team that I could definitively see like, oh, they are going to trade. If they end up trading players, they end up trading them. But this is just from my perspective. So I'm going to go over my 2 Eastern Conference teams here first. Starting things off with the Philadelphia Flyers. It has just been yet another train wreck season for the Flyers, another year where they're going to miss the playoffs. The top tier teams in the East are so far ahead of teams like the Flyers, the Islanders, who people were hopeful could be playoff contenders this year. That just is not in the card. So it's best for Philly to just get rid of a couple of names on the roster that they can. The biggest name, of course, is longtime Flyer captain Claude Giroux. Now he is actually, his name has been swirling around a lot. A lot of teams in the East, like the Florida Panthers, the Boston Bruins, and I think the Rangers are another team I saw, have heavy interest in him. I wouldn't be surprised. I think Giroux will be dealt, but it's not going to happen yet. I think he's one of those deals that will happen come deadline day because he's actually close to playing his 1,000th career game, which is a big deal in the NHL. And the Flyers have to let him play game number 1,000 in their uniform before they end up trading him, and he will. He will reach 1,000 games before the trade deadline, and I think the 1,000th game is projected to be at home. If I was reading the schedule right earlier, so they'll get everything they want. Drew will get his 1,000th game as a Flyer, and then probably coming up to the deadline for the next bit, he will be dealt to a team. Who pays up for him? Who gets him is a big question. But I think there are a couple other pieces that they could trade. Defenseman Justin Braun and Keith Yandel. Keith Yandel this season hasn't been spectacular. It's been a while since he's really been that good, but he's just on such a cheap 1 year deal. Because he signed a 1 year deal last offseason. I could see a team giving up like a fifth, sixth, seventh round pick for him, and a little bit of the same with Justin Braun. Justin Braun is that physical, tough, right-handed shot defenseman that's so coveted for like playoff teams. And again, 1 year left at a very reasonable cap hit. You wouldn't have to worry about retaining salary, I don't think, because he's under $2 million on his cap this year. I think those are 2 guys that they would definitely trade if they could get something back for at this point. Let a couple of the other players, maybe some young pieces in the organization play. And finally, James Van Riemsdyk, probably the most unrealistic because of his high cap hit at $7 million, but he only has 1 year left after the season's over. And if the Flyers could do just a touch of salary retention on his deal, I think they could end up finding a partner for Van Riemsdyk, who scored 20, 25 goals in his career before. He's proven to be a good player, physical forward at times. I think the team could find some value in him. Is it likely this year? Probably not. Maybe next year when it is the last year of his deal. But if maybe they could get a deal worked out, I could see the Flyers potentially wanting to move on from him because I think his return to Philly just hasn't worked out. It just really hasn't. Uh, my only other team in the Eastern Conference is a team I think most people would expect to make some deals. The Columbus Blue Jackets got a couple pieces here with just 1 year left. The defenseman in Kukan. Again, this is one of those guys who could just fill out the defensive core, fill out the blue line going into the playoffs. Max Domi, who is on the final year of his deal, a solid enough player. I think a good middle 6'4" that a team can find some use for come a playoff run. Same with a Gustav Nyquist, middle six player. You could put him on the wing, some hits here and there, but he could score. He's had 20, 25 goals himself, and he's only got 1 year left after this. Essentially consider him like another James Van Riemsdyk, but he's a little bit cheaper already. So I think that would, if I had to guess preference, I think Gustav Nyquist would be the player that most teams would prefer because of the lower cap hit. And the big name I think is most interesting coming up at the deadline, aside from Claude Giroux, name value wise, is Patrick Laine. He's only got 1 year left on his contract. It's very hit or miss if he could get dealt because I think his goal scoring ability is still coveted by a lot of people. I think he's slightly improved as a player in his time in Columbus, but he is for the most part still just predominantly a goal scorer. And hey, a playoff team could pay a pretty penny for his services. I wouldn't be surprised if someone did take a risk here. And again, with just 1 year left on his deal, I don't think it would take all that much, but I'd be interested to see if a team would be willing to take the risk and get him. And again, that would be an easy salary retention situation because it's only one. This is the only year, so I think Columbus would easily eat it if it meant they could get some assets back for a guy who it's also hit or miss if he even stays with the team. I think he's kind of said he wouldn't mind staying in Columbus, but at the same time, like slowly in the NHL, we're starting to realize like these guys, even when they say something, it's not cut and dry like it has been before. So I think that's a wait and see deal, but I think Columbus could do some good dealing here. And they have several first round picks this year. They got some depth picks. I think they could get a couple more depth picks out of some of the names I've said. And I think for Columbus in a transition phase, they're actually doing better this season than I think most expected. But I still think they need to commit to getting these high potential, high level prospects through the system. They had two top, I want to say 12 picks in the draft last year, or 13, whichever their second first round pick that they got from the Blackhawks was. They added two prospects into the system. Just keep building up the prospect pool, I think, is what Columbus needs to do here with some deals. And I think those trades would help. Now, going over to the Western Conference, like I said, I have four teams here. Go a little bit quicker here. The Arizona Coyotes, they have 3 first-round picks this year and 5 second-round picks in this year's draft. So they have the first 64 picks. 8 of them belong to Arizona. They are going to bolster the prospect pool this year. But 2023, they don't have as many picks. I think a couple names on this team, if they were to get traded, I think Arizona needs to focus more on getting draft picks in later seasons in 2023 and 2024. I think of 1 year deal, 1 year left on guys like Phil Kessel and Galchenyuk. I think you could get Galchenyuk's a nice depth bottom 6 piece the team would like. He played well in Toronto last year, and they made the playoffs. So I think it's proven that he can be a contributor on a playoff caliber team. Phil Kessel is a 20, 30 goal scorer, 40 goal scorer really in his peak years. He's not so much that anymore, but again, 1 year left. I think a team could potentially, if the price is right, they can make a deal, get him. He's got a modified no trade, so it'd be very, or modified no movement, excuse me. So it'd be very like it needs to be a specific team that he would approve. But I definitely could see a deal like that coming, unless he just wants to stay in Arizona, which Phil Kessel's a little bit weird, so I wouldn't be surprised if he wants to end up staying with the Coyotes, but who knows. But the big name to watch out for them is Jakob Chychrun. He has 3 years left on his contract after this season at just a 4.6 cap hit. He can be a lefty or righty defenseman. He fills out the top 4 so well. This kid has so much talent. He's really started to show his talent the last like season and a half or so. So he's supremely good. I think a team will have to pay. I think he's the most valuable asset they have. He's going to be the guy that nets them probably like a first and a second in a deal. I really wouldn't be surprised if that's how much it would take, like a first in 2023 and a second in 2024, and maybe just a future first and like one really good prospect would get Jakob Chychrun out of Arizona because the kid, very good cap hit, good production. I think he's the valuable commodity there. Next team I have is the Seattle Kraken. I'm sorry, Chris. Seattle Kraken just not have been good this season. And despite that, they do have a couple pieces they could trade off here who only have 1 year left. You have Mark Giordano is the biggest name. Not a strong defensive player at this age, but can still perform on offense. He could still be on the power play. He could help quarterback the power play there. He's still a good offensive mind. good piece there. And then you have depth forwards like a Cal Yarncroc and a Marcus Johansson. Those are two players that always, like, teams will always find a spot on their roster for them this year, for like a third or a fourth round pick. And my biggest thing with Seattle, they don't have a lot of depth picks, and their prospect pool, it's not outstanding. Like, they just made all of their picks last year. I think they only had one or two extra picks. That's not enough for an expansion team, like, which is what they were that last year, and now this season completing year one. I think they need to really focus in on moves. I think these are three guys that should be traded because you can get, I think you get at least a third or a fourth back for Yarncroc. Maybe you could convince a team for a third, if not a fourth, for Johansson. And Giordano, I think, could definitely net you a second, maybe a decent prospect. So I think you need to pull the trigger here if you're Seattle, because, like, there's no reason to keep these guys, because they're gonna, I don't think they're saying. I think they're just gonna leave the team after this season's over with how bad it was. My last two teams. So this one kind of, I wouldn't have put them on this list a couple weeks ago, but they've kind of skidded down in the rankings after they were really a surprise team. But I gotta say, the Anaheim Ducks, they have an amazing young core. They have such great young pieces that have performed well this year. I think the future is bright in Anaheim. And I kind of expected this to happen to them. I'm not going to lie. I kind of expected them to start to struggle a little bit in the second half. Young teams, they'll have a good first half of the year. But once the NHL All-Star break ends and once we get near the deadline, these young teams tend to falter a little bit. And I think that's just what's happening with Anaheim. There are a couple pieces they could trade. I think Adam Henrique, he has 2 years left after this season completes, with just under $6 million a year. He's been on a playoff team. He's been on a team that's reached the Stanley Cup final before in his career. So this is definitely a guy with veteran playoff experience. Could be on your second line. I think would be a good center. I think he'd be valuable to a playoff team. The cap would be a little bit of an issue, but I think it could be worked around there. Much cheaper pieces, I think, would be Ricard Raquel and Derek Grant that teams could acquire for, not having to worry about the salary cap gymnastics as much for mid-round picks. I think the two biggest names, however, that could be dealt, Josh Manson, again, similar to what I said about Justin Braun in Philly, but Josh Manson's a bit better, but still right-handed, top four defenseman, valuable. Anaheim could actually get up. I wouldn't be surprised if Anaheim could somehow swindle a team for a first round pick for Manson. Not because he's that kind of a player, but his role is something that has been highly valued and coveted over playoff teams for the last at least half decade or so. And finally, Hampus Lindholm is the big name on the team. He only has 1 year left. Very talented two-way player. I love his game personally. I think he fits so well on a team. I think you could put him on your top pair. I think you could put him on your second line and make your second line better. I'm a big Hampus Lindholm fan, and I hope he gets paid in free agency this year. And if you're Anaheim, this is kind of a situation that I don't think teams look at the other side of. It's like, yes, you want to keep him because he's talented, but if he leaves, you lost him for nothing. And I think Anaheim at risk of missing the playoffs now because the Pacific Division, the teams you're starting to see. Edmonton, they've struggled a little bit recently after a good stretch, but they're still ahead of them. Vegas is still ahead of them. Los Angeles has shocked everyone with their little run. They're way above them. And of course, the Calgary Flames being top in the division for a majority of the season. I think if you're Anaheim, I think, okay, the young kids did their job, but it's just not our year. And I think you need to sell off pieces. And I wouldn't be surprised if Hampus Lindholm is a guy they sell off, because I don't see him staying in Anaheim, my personal opinion. So I think it'd just be best to trade him. And again, this is another guy, kind of like what I said with Chychrun. Even though he doesn't have the term left on him, I think Hampus Lindholm is a guy you could get a first or a second out of, at least, or a second, 2 seconds at a prospect, something along those lines. I think that's the kind of defenseman he is. Now, the last team. This is the main one. My Chicago Blackhawks. I don't even know where to begin. I really don't even know where to begin. I still hold a grudge to this day against that scumbag Stan Bowman. I hope he rots in the deepest hells of the final ring of Dante's Inferno for what he did to the team last year. I will not forgive him. I don't care if Seth Jones is good offensively. I'm not a fan of the contract for team purposes. I'm really not. We're just about to finish the Tays and Kane contracts, and now we have another big one holding some of the cap, which who knows how long if the NHL cap stays stagnant. So, thanks once again, like I've said on this podcast before, fuck you, Bowman. Now, pieces that this team could actually trade off. I think Dominic Kubalik is a guy that could see his way out of Chicago. This is last year on his deal. Not performing as well as he's done in the past, but Kubalik, he's got a little bit of muscle to him. He could throw the body around a bit. He's proven to be a good goal scorer. I want to say, I think it was his rookie season or his second season where he had 30 goals. Like, the kid can score. And I'm saying kid because he's still pretty young. I want to say he's only like 24, 25. I'd hate to let him go, but I just don't see a future in Chicago where he fits. And I wouldn't be surprised if they end up trading him here at the deadline to get something in return. And I think a team will pay a pretty penny for Kubalik, especially because he's a restricted free agent. I think restricted free agents are very valuable for if you're trading for just guys with 1 year left. I think that'd be the way to go there. Brendan Hagel has been a guy who has been in rumors recently. Some reports are suggesting Chicago could somehow get a first rounder out of him. I don't know if they can. If they somehow do, I'm pulling the trigger right away. I don't care if he's played as well as he has. He's like a middle six forward at best. Realistically, he's just having a really good year. We saw this happen once already. Chicago, Eric Gustafson on defense a couple years ago had an amazing offensive season, and I think they should have dealt him during that season because I think at the end of the day he's just not a good two-way defender. So I think they need to trade Hagel, capitalize on the value while you can. A couple names: Calvin DeHaan, Tyler Johnson. I would love to see if they could trade him, but iffy if they will. The biggest name is Marc-Andre Fleury, ultimately with Chicago. Last year of his contract that he signed years back, I think Fleury has played pretty well this season. Not the same as he did during his Vezina campaign last year, but I think at the end of the day, Marc-Andre Fleury is still a very good goaltender you can win in the playoffs with. Just Chicago's been so poor defensively, especially like Fleury's numbers would be better if you take out the whole first 25 to 30 games of the season where Chicago was a bottom five team in the league. They've played better since, but you had such a significant stretch hurt you statistically for Fleury, and Kevin Lankinen just not having the season that Chicago was hoping he would have to be the backup. Like, I think Fleury's played really well, and I think you can get he is the guy where it's like you could get a first round pick out of him for sure. So you have two guys on this roster you could potentially get a first out of between Hagel and Fleury. You got to pull the trigger if you're Chicago, especially because you traded your first round pick to Columbus last year in that Seth Jones trade, and the only way you retain the pick this year is if it's in the top two. And if it's not, it goes to Columbus. And if it is in the top two, then Columbus gets your first round pick next year. So just a cavalcade of issues with the Blackhawks. Very disappointing with the team overall. And not because I had expectations personally, but because I still think they should have just gone with the rebuild. I'm very disappointed they didn't. And this, you reap what you sow. They hired a new coach during the season. I think he's got the team, with playing a little bit better. But just at the end of the day, there's no future for this season for the Blackhawks. Just please trade guys, get assets back, just do the right thing. And they hired a new general manager, and I really hope he does the right thing here at the deadline. Because if they don't, man, I know people say if your team has had success, you should just be quiet even if they're struggling. But man, it feels so much further and further that my team won 3 Stanley Cups in 6 years. It really feels further and further away, and I want to at least get to them being competent again. I'm not asking for championship contendership right now. I've seen my team win 3 times in my lifetime in hockey. Trust me, I'm very thankful for that. But I want them. I want this team to at least look competent, and that's not what they've been for a while now, from the general manager to the ownership. So at the end of the day, that's all I hope. Please, Chicago, make the right decisions at this deadline, especially Fleury, who I said last week, half the teams I mentioned last week could end up trading for Marc-Andre Fleury. So there you go. But yeah, those are my 6 teams in hockey that could get that should be sellers at this deadline. We'll see if they are. I hope, like I said last week, I hope for a very active trade deadline. And a couple weeks from now, 2 weeks from now will be the post NHL trade deadline episode, and there will definitely be breakdown of that. And as I teased last week, and I'll tease it again, we may be having a special guest on that episode to help me do it. But we'll see. We'll see. Schedules need to work out. We got to make a lot of moves here. Got to get everything structured and in place. But we're making things happen out here, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I'll say.
Contracts need to be structured appropriately, and they need to be given out, and agreements need to be made. But yeah, we'll see what the CBA says about the Summit Sports contracts. But anyway, beautifully done as always, Jurg, handling the NHL portion of this show. Now we move on over to the NFL world, where things happened. Things have happened this past week, and we're going to talk about those things. Just quarterback movement galore. Quarterback movement galore. What is that? QMG. Maybe that'll be the title for this week's episode. Probably not, because you need that search engine to be booming, and QMG just doesn't sound right. So a lot of things have happened in the NFL world. A lot of quarterbacks have been moved. We're going to talk about them. We'll go in terms of level of shock value, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. But all right, so we'll start off with Carson Wentz. Then we'll go on to Aaron Rodgers. And then we will finish off with Russell Wilson. Does that sound good, guys?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Okay. So I'll tell you guys the trade packages for each quarterback. And then basically you guys could give me your thoughts, comments, concerns, criticisms, all of that. I guess you give a letter grade. So yeah, I'll start off with Carson Wentz. So the Carson Wentz trade. The Colts deal Carson Wentz to the Washington Commanders for a 2022 third-round pick, a 2023 third-round pick that escalates to a second round pick if Wentz plays 70% of his snaps, and they also get a 2022 second round pick as well. Whereas the Washington Commanders receive Carson Wentz and also a 2022 second round pick as well. So yeah, that is basically the trade for that. In terms of Aaron Rodgers, he resigns. I think the initial report was 4 years, 200 million, I believe. But I think some of the details for that have kind of been a little skirmish. Aaron Rodgers did tweet afterwards, "Hey everyone, quote, hey everyone, just wanted to clear some things up. Yes, I will be playing with the Packers next year. However, reports about me signing a contract are inaccurate, as are the supposed terms of the contract I quote unquote signed. I'm very excited to be back. Muscle emoji, hashtag year 18, heart emoji." So Aaron Rodgers is back with the Packers. As of right now, it's only for next year, but God knows with this man. And to cap it all off, the biggest news, in my opinion, that I think overshadowed Aaron Rodgers news, Russell Wilson traded to the Broncos. That's right. The Broncos receive Russell Wilson and a fourth round pick. The Seahawks receive quarterback Drew Lock, defensive lineman Shelby Harris, tight end Noah Fant, two first round picks, a 2022 so two first round picks, two second round picks, and a fifth round pick as well. So that's the order we will go by. Carson Wentz first, Aaron Rodgers second, Russell Wilson third. Damian, let me start off with you. Thoughts, comments, concerns, criticisms, letter grades for each team and how they performed in the trade. Yeah, winners, losers, whatever you want. Go ahead. So we'll start off with Carson Wentz.
So Carson Wentz, I'm gonna give the Washington football team a B+ on this. I thought they were the winners in the trade because they were searching for a quarterback. Obviously, we heard rumors about them making a big offer for Russell Wilson and getting denied about it. But this is a team that feels that they're ready to compete now and they're a quarterback away, kind of similar to the Broncos. Obviously, they couldn't get Russell Wilson, so if you really look at it, the best next available quarterback outside of Aaron Rodgers, obviously, was probably Carson Wentz. If you could debate it with Jimmy Garoppolo, but Carson Wentz probably is a lot more talented than Jimmy G. Jimmy G is just kind of more proven and more of a safe option. But trading for Carson Wentz here, you definitely upgrade at quarterback from Taylor Heineke or whatever was going on there at quarterback. The team will definitely be better. They traded 2/3 and swapped second round picks, so I don't think they gave up that much. You didn't give up a second rounder, you still have your first. So they really kept their premium assets if they want to either draft a player or move the picks for another good player. But Wentz is definitely going to help them improve in a division that you definitely need a quarterback to compete with the Cowboys. And the Eagles as well. The Eagles have 3 first-round picks, so they're definitely going to be a lot more improved than they were this year. Jalen Hurts was probably going to take another step up this year because of all the weapons that they should be able to get him with the assets they do have. So a lot of people talk about how bad Carson Wentz has been, and I agree he has been awful with controlling the ball and taking care of the ball. But if you really look at it, like at his numbers, he had 27 touchdowns with 7 picks last year. Like that isn't bad. That's a pretty good ratio, and that's a lot better than most quarterbacks in the league. Now, I'm not advocating for him that he's a top 10 quarterback or one of the best quarterbacks or a quarterback that can even win a Super Bowl because he's not. He hasn't proven to be stable enough to do that, whether it's injuries or it's taking care of the ball because he did have 8 fumbles. But for the Washington Commanders situation, like you really couldn't get any better than this, and you needed a quarterback to try to improve that team because that defense is, although they had a down year last year, they had one of the best defenses in the league the year previous, and Chase Young coming back from an ACL injury. You still have Terry McLaurin at the wide receiver. You have Curtis Samuel. You have Antonio Gibson. You have a pretty decent offensive line that you can definitely improve upon, though. So this team has the makings of a really good team that could be competitive, and bringing in a guy like Carson Wentz should definitely help that. As for the Colts side, I don't know what they're doing because that's a team that's, in my opinion, even more ready to compete than the Washington Commanders are. That defense is probably the best in the league. You have an absolute stud in Jonathan Taylor, arguably the best running back in the league. You have the best offensive line in the league. You could probably use another wide receiver or two, but they have the money to spend to do that. And now you get rid of a competent quarterback that almost got you to playoffs. Obviously, he had that stinker in the end, but he got you to that spot where you were at. And obviously, another year, a whole offseason, like You definitely could have been better off with that. So I don't know what they're doing. They don't have a first round pick. It's not like they're going to draft a quarterback. I don't know what quarterbacks outside Jimmy Garoppolo are available. It seems like Jimmy Garoppolo is their last option, but for the Colts, I'm going to give them a C because I really don't know where they go from here because they're not a rebuilding team. They're a team that's ready to win now and just needed a quarterback. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go from now. I think it's Jimmy G or bust because, like I said, they don't have the first round pick because they traded to the Eagles for Wentz. But that's my analysis from that trade.
I don't really blame you there. I'm relatively similar. I think for the Colts, it's kind of the full final grade. I think this is the first draft grade, bringing it back to our high school and college days for us. But I think this is kind of a first draft a grade because I think we need to wait to see what quarterback that they end up getting. So that's why I kind of want to wait because I kind of echoed these sentiments last week when we talked about the QB's Dame that Wentz didn't have as bad of a season as people are making it seem. It's just he had a terrible season finale. If the Colts win that game, or even if the Colts lost, but Wentz put up like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, but the defense just absolutely crapped out, like I think people would be more okay with it. And I think Wentz would still be an Indy. But because of that bad game, and I think also the 2 Tennessee games that they ended up losing had in part to do with it, because I think they wanted to get Wentz to try to beat the Titans. Like, I at the end of the day, ultimately, that's why he's gone now. So Chris echoed the package. The Colts were able to get Wentz's full contract off. They don't need to pay anything in terms of their salary cap towards him. Washington is taking on the full thing for this season. They were also able to move up 5 spots because they traded their own second round pick this year. They got Washington's second round pick, which was 5 spots above. They also got a third round pick, and they got next year's third round pick, which I forget it was similar this year. If Wentz plays a certain percentage of offensive snaps, it could actually go up to a second. So that's a really good deal if he ends up being the starter in Washington, which he should be off the bat. I'm sorry, Taylor Heineke did absolutely nothing to me to prove that he should maintain that starting job. And if Ron Rivera says otherwise, then that organization, it just continues to be a disappointment. There's no reason why Taylor Heineke should be the starter going into next year. But that irregardless, I agree with Dame. I think there's no issue here in just going for it because I think ultimately we'll talk more detail about it. I think there was a reason why Russ wasn't going to be traded to Washington, aside from the rumors that have been circulating about what the potential package could have been. I think this was the next best option because I don't know if Jimmy G to Washington really would have been that good personally. I think Jimmy G would be better off with another team or two that is still looking for quarterback help. And I think ultimately Washington, this was the best they could do. They gave up a little bit for it, but they still were able to keep a second round pick. Yeah, they had to give up their third, but this is the way I see it. They essentially traded down 5 spots and gave up a third round pick for a starting quarterback. Who, this is the key here, boys. He has a zero dead cap hit after this season. So if this implodes, everything just goes wrong, they can cut him and they won't be on the books for the next 2 years. According to Spotrac, um, he has zero dead cap at the next 2 years, where his cap hits are supposed to be 26 and 27 mil. So that's very valuable for Washington. I think this is pretty low risk for them. And you get a guy who maybe you can make things go right. Maybe there's something with Ron Rivera's leadership that could help out Carson Wentz. Who knows what it could be? So I think a B plus is a very fair grade for the Washington side of things here. By the way, actually, fun fact, because I was looking at the schedule, not only do they face the Eagles twice, football team is facing the AFC South this year, so they will face the Colts this year as well. So that'll be interesting. He gets to face both of his former teams in revenge games, which I find very funny. I think for the Colts, I'm kind of with Dame here. I think an initial grade here is a C plus. All depends on the quarterback they get. Now I have a theory here, boys. So this is. I feel like I'm making this happen more and more. Got to call it. We've got to give it like a segment about this or something. We need a segment name. But this is my personal theory here because of the trade we're going to talk about here later. I think the Vegas Raiders are going to look at the landscape in the AFC West. I think they're going to be open to trading Derek Carr because I do not care if they made the playoffs last year. I do not care if they shocked everyone. Starting this season, they are. I don't think. I just do not personally believe that they are going to be able to compete with the AFC West. I think that's going to be made apparent very quickly, and I think there is a outside chance if Chris Ballard starts making calls to Vegas about Derek Carr, I think there's a chance they pick up the phones there and they start just having initial discussions. Because I'm sorry, Derek Carr. Look, good guy, good person. We all agree. Happy for him that he had the season he did. I just don't know. I don't think they could compete in the AFC West this year. I think last year was a little bit of a run. It was a little bit fortunate. It was a little bit lucky. And I hate saying teams are lucky. I really do. But how else are we going to chalk it up to them at the end of the day? What else can we say? So I think there is a very outside chance here. This is Jerk's theory of the week, boys, that Derek Carr could end up being an Indianapolis Colt here in the future. And if that ends up happening, then I would actually upgrade the trade for the Colts to an A. If Derek Carr is the final outcome that they get.
All right. Okay. Let's transition to Aaron Rodgers now. Jerk, how about you start us off with this one? This is your boy.
I was so disappointed. I was really upset.
Right? What an anticlimactic ending to that story.
So you guys want to hear a funny story about that actually real quick?
Sure.
So at work, because I was at work that day, I had to prompt the noon show when I went up. And I had to go up early because we did an interview that day. So once the interview was done about like 25 minutes before the show, I want to say. Then 20 minutes beforehand, so like a couple minutes after the interview finished, the Aaron Rodgers news broke that he was staying. Everything changed. Everything went crazy. And I will bring up the Russell Wilson story as well because that also has some fun behind it. But the Aaron Rodgers decision essentially changed the entire noon Sports Center, which not the first time we've seen something like that happen. Not the first time I prompted the noon Sports Center when a big quarterback had to freaking make their decision with what they were doing in their career. But
Ben
irregardless.
Roethlisberger?
Well, that wasn't a big decision. Who gives a fuck about Ben Roethlisberger? Seriously, Chris, come on. Let's be real here. Moving to the actual decision, I was disappointed. Very much like a father. I wasn't mad. I was just disappointed in Aaron Rodgers because I was really hoping he would finally leave Green Bay. That organization does not deserve to keep him. I don't care what anyone says. People are trying to make, in retrospect, that the Jordan Love pick was the ultimate motivator. I don't care. You still traded up and wasted a first-round pick on a quarterback when Aaron Rodgers still had a lot left to give. I don't care if people are trying to say that the only reason he played the last 2 years as well as he did was the Jordan Love pick. That's still terrible asset management to me because you traded up for a quarterback who is never going to see the field in your uniform. That is the dumbest goddamn decision to make. And the fact that people are trying to rationalize it this time later for this is the stupidest thing in the world. So that organization to me just does not deserve to keep him. They really don't. I don't think they've done a good enough job over the collective decade plus that he has started for them to always put him in the right position to win each and every single year. And a big reason for that is because they haven't always given him say in the organization to what they should do. The same say that Peyton Manning has had. The same say that Tom Brady got in Tampa. They gave him everything he wanted in Tampa. Bruce Arians said at the beginning of the season they won the Super Bowl, no, we're not going to get Antonio Brown. And what did they do later that season? They got Antonio Brown. You want to know why? Because of Tom goddamn Brady. Have the Packers done that for Aaron Rodgers? You know what they did when Aaron Rodgers finally got something he wanted? They got him Randall Cobb. Yeah, let that sit. They got him Randall Cobb when for Brady they get Antonio Brown. For Peyton Manning, they would get whoever the hell he wanted. Remember when the Broncos lost that Super Bowl to Seattle? What did they do that offseason? DeMarcus Ware, TJ Ward, Aqib Talib. What the hell does this team do losing that first NFC Championship game to the 49ers? Backup quarterback. Who they traded up for? Like, no. Fuck the Packers. I don't like that organization. I really wish he wouldn't have stayed. And now they have to deal with the salary cap hell that is, they need to restructure his contract, which I know he's going to do at the end of the day to help give them salary cap relief this year. They franchise tag Devontae Adams. They need to figure things out with him now. They need to figure out a lot with that roster. Like, part of the reason, and I said this last week, that I think Rodgers should have left is because I think it was better for both sides. Because it's harder to fill out a 53-man roster now keeping Adams and Rodgers. And I think it actually would have been in the best interest for fielding a whole organization if they would have left, if they would have agreed to trade him somewhere, if they would have just let Adams walk in free agency. I think that was going to be the plan. If Rodgers had not made a decision before the franchise tag window, I think he would be leaving because it would have been too late to franchise tag Devontae and have at least the protection of having him under the tag. That's my personal opinion, at least. So I was angry. I was disappointed in it. I mean, good for him at the end of the day. Ultimately, he's going to make the decision he wants. But now he's staying in Green Bay. They need to figure things out because Devontae Adams is the only good wide receiver they have under contract. They only have like one or two other receivers under contract right now, and Randall Cobb will get cut to clear salary cap space because they restructured Bakhtiari's deal. They restructured Kenny Clark's deal. I think they're going to cut Za'Darius Smith. They need to give contract extensions to Preston Smith and Adrian Amos because actually, I've said this before, this is the funny thing about the NFL. It is the only sport where if you give someone a contract extension, you're actually clearing up salary cap space for the future because you can push cap hits like across. which is what would happen if they signed Smith and Adrian Amos. So they actually should hurry up and work on those contract extensions for them, like 2-3 year deals, because that'll actually help out with this year's salary cap. Just saying, there's your cap expertise, Green Bay, free of charge. You don't deserve it. But yeah, ultimately, I think like I was just upset. Dame called it, so I know he's happy about that. But just like they're going to be great. They're going to be a double-digit win team. They're guaranteed to make the playoffs. Can they win a Super Bowl? I don't know. Like I'm not going to say they will or will not. Like this is what I hate. This is my number one thing. And Dame, I think you can attest to this. Like I hate everyone trying to make a decision now. Aaron Rodgers has to win the Super Bowl this year or next year. We don't know what the goddamn team is going to look like around him. Can you wait and see what the Packers can actually do to fill out the rest of the roster before you make a decision on Green Bay being a Super Bowl contender again?
No.
Like that to me is the most annoying thing. No, apparently, yeah. Apparently not.
Jared,
I'm
come
in the
on,
wrong media
bro.
field.
They're
Yeah, you're
contenders,
right.
dog.
No, but no. I'm just saying, like everyone's acting like, oh, they have to win the Super Bowl this year. Like, but like if they're gonna put out like a CFL caliber defense, no, they're not gonna win the Super Bowl this year because that defense is probably gonna give up 40 points in the NFC Championship game, which they've done before, by the way. Cough, cough. So that's my whole thing. Like, I wish he would have left to give himself a new opportunity. He didn't. It's on you, Green Bay. Everyone's saying now it's on Aaron Rodgers. No. It's on that organization. That organization fails to win a championship. It's the greatest failure in sports of the last like 30 plus years. They only got 2 championships of having Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. All I'm saying.
Dame?
Yeah, I mean, I was right. Let's give me my flowers. No, I'm kidding. But I did hope that I was gonna be wrong because I do think he deserves to go somewhere else. I don't think Green Bay really deserved him. But at the end of the day, like you gotta look at it like what better option did he really have? I get it. I get all the front office like not treating him right and not giving him what he wants, but what other options did he have? Was he gonna go? He was gonna go to Denver and then have to deal with Patrick Mahomes twice a year, the Chargers twice a year, the Raiders. Although I know they're not that good, they're still better than anyone in the NFC North. Twice a year, and then he has to go through the AFC with Buffalo maybe in the playoffs and stuff like that. Like the AFC is loaded, and the AFC West is loaded. That's not a division you want to play twice a year. Instead, you can stay in the NFC North. You play the Lions twice a year, play the Bears twice a year, and you play the Vikings twice a year. So it kind of benefits him to stay in that division because going late into his career, he could have kind of like what Brady had with the AFC East. Rodgers could easily have that with NFC North. You have 5 to 6 easy wins a year that could help you get really good seeding going into the playoffs. So I personally wanted to leave because I just wanted it to be like a fuck you to the Packers organization for treating him the way they did. But at the end of the day, if I like the way he looked at it and the way I think you could look at it, like I don't really see a better option for him out there. Now he's gonna get paid really well, although it's gonna help them with their cap situation this year. I'm sure he's gonna be paid the most in the NFL history for a quarterback. They're gonna re-sign Devontae Adams, his guy. Like that team is still really good. Like it's just gonna come down to them. Can they get over that hump in the playoffs? And although it's not fun either that he stayed. A lot of people are expecting him to go different teams. Is gonna be a lot more fun, a lot more exciting. Like at the end of the day, this could be best for not only him, for the team, but for NFL as well. Keeping the team like the Packers, who are not a big market, viable in the league, and they're definitely gonna be one of the best, one of the Super Bowl contenders going into this year, as long as they can keep Rodgers and Adams, of course.
Well, one of the teams that was monitoring the whole Aaron Rodgers situation was the Denver Broncos, which, you know, clearly had a plan B because they made a move after the whole Aaron Rodgers saga kind of, I guess, ended. They went and traded for Russell Wilson. So, yeah, I mean, talk about a consolation prize. So, Jurg, I mean, this news broke out of nowhere. This was kind of out of left field, kind of insane to be honest. And I think it kind of did overshadow the Aaron Rodgers saga because it was just I mean, they've been talking for a few weeks, but to us, I don't think we had knowledge of it prior to
Out of
that.
nowhere. It was
Yeah,
out of
so
nowhere.
kind of random. So Jurg, talk to me. What do you think about this whole fiasco? I mean, I guess this whole scenario.
Well, Chris, as a great man that you and me both admire and
Mm,
respect, once said, "There's always a plan B."
yeah,
And
true,
that's what
true.
the Denver Broncos had up their sleeve. Kind of like you said, this is definitely in talks for weeks. Trades like this just don't happen out of nowhere. I think Denver was obviously talking to Seattle beforehand, like just keeping tabs. Like, hey, let's start on just a trade structure, and if the Rogers things falls through, we move, and that's literally what happened. So once again, Funny story here, if I may. I apologize if I'm making everything personal, but this is just the life of sports media that I just want to share, like to anyone
Nice.
that ends up being like a production assistant. That same show, like I said, so it happened the same day. We're in the second to last block of the show, right? And we're going, and the Russell Wilson news hits. We don't even go to the last commercial break, bro. We immediately go to talking about Russell Wilson. We spend the whole final part of the show just talking about that. That's just the beauty of sports media, and like the producers like asking people, whoever's left in the screening room, to get some good Russell Wilson video on tape so we could do that. It's just absolutely insane. It was absolutely incredible. It was a wild experience, to say the very least, to be a part of prompting the noon show when both Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson broke the news that day. Fun times. Now moving on to the actual news analysis part of it. Yeah, so obviously the two sides were working on this long before it came out, and finally, once it happened, the contingency plan kicked in. I'm sure the 2 hours between Rogers' decision and the Russell Wilson trade announcement was probably them just finalizing like the total assets that would be sent both ways. And you summarized it off the top, Chris, but I just want to remind people what the total package was. Russell Wilson and the 114th overall pick in this year's draft, so I believe fourth round pick, go to the Denver Broncos in exchange for the ninth, the 40th, and the 144th overall picks this year. So first, second, and fifth, a first and second round pick in next year's draft. Drew Lock, Shooter Sleeve Drew, Shelby Harris, and Noah Fant, all going to Seattle. Now, um, I think you can argue both sides got a little bit of a win here. I think this is the reset button Seattle has needed. I've said for 2 to 3 years now, I think the Russell Wilson era should come to an end because I just didn't think that they could win another Super Bowl with him anymore. I just didn't think the roster was going to be ready enough for Russ. And when he got hurt this year and he came back, and yes, I know he still played a little bit injured, even though he was deemed ready to play. I think you could tell he wasn't the same. I just didn't think that that team had enough to win anymore. I think ultimately, Schneider and the organization agreed. Pete Carroll, obviously, my only thing is with Pete Carroll staying, that's the thing that threw me off last week because both me and Dame said Russ was going to end up staying because Pete Carroll was still there. Like, I felt if Pete Carroll knew about this, I don't know if he would have stayed, man. I don't think Pete Carroll should be like that hyped up to be here for a rebuilding situation. Although, could it stay as one potentially? We will see what happens in breaking news because I don't know if you guys heard. Dame might mention it, but there are now rumors abound on what Seattle could do now with the new draft capital they have. But I'll address that in a moment here. Um, so just breaking down the pack, I think Denver, we all said that this team was a quarterback away last season from being a playoff caliber team. And now they have a quarterback, a pretty good quarterback. The only person they lost on defense is Shelby Harris. And look, all due respect, I know he was a locker room guy, and I don't normally like it when locker room guys get traded. But because that's happening now in the offseason, not mid-season, I think that they'll more than recover. I think if this was a mid-season deal, I think the guys would miss Harris. But I think they'll be able to replace his role on defense fine. That defense still has some talented guys. We know the defensive backfield is good. Chubb, hopefully for them next season, is able to perform. If they get that defense going like it was in certain games last season, and they will get better now because Russell Wilson's offensive talent is leading them, not Teddy Two Gloves or Drew Lock. I think that's big. I got to give an A minus at minimum here for Denver because they finally got a good quarterback over there for the first time since Peyton Manning's second to last season. Because remember, Peyton Manning's last season, he threw 17 interceptions and only 9 touchdowns. I'm not calling him a good quarterback that season. I don't care if it's Peyton Manning. He was not a good quarterback that year at all. If I'm to grade Seattle here really fast, Dame, I'm interested to see what you'll think because I think I've seen both ways this year. Or this year, Jesus. I've seen both ways on this. I'm kind of 50-50 with Seattle because honestly, to me, if we're going back to last season, what the rumored trade packages were and what some other quarterbacks have been rumored to get, just 2 firsts and 2 seconds for Russ. Now, I know they got a couple players back, but the players you got are good, a pretty good, maybe a game or two great, but I'll say a pretty good defensive lineman, a quarterback who, let's be real here, his future at best is being a backup. And Noah Fant, I love Noah Fant, but he's on the last year of his rookie deal now, so you have to re-sign him, you have to re-up him, and you got the first. Yes, I think like people are trying to argue that now that Seattle has some high picks this time that they can make it happen. Let's be real here. If we go back, has Seattle been that amazing with drafting and developing? They've whiffed on a lot of picks. My problem with this type of situation is people always like to point out, like, oh, look what they did. They picked so and so here, they picked so and so there. Okay, you're gonna mention picks that were made like almost a decade ago because the Russ pick, the Richard Sherman pick, the Cam Chancellor pick were all like now a decade ago at this point. A, and B, their recent years. Like this is why I hate it when people try to say that a team had a good draft with one pick. No, one pick does not make a draft good. You picked one good player. You did not have a good overall draft. So I want to see what Seattle can do if they end up keeping this picks. Like I said, there could be rumors there, but let's just assume that they keep these picks for now. I'm on the fence here. If I have to give Seattle something, this isn't bad, so I'm not going to give it super low grade. But damn, I don't know. I want to hear your grade. I think right now, like, convince me because I think this is like a B plus at best if for Seattle right now. I'm not super high on this deal just because of what it was allegedly could have been last year, and that's my thing.
Um, so for Seattle on that side, I'm not too big on it because at the end of the day, they're the ones that gave up the star quarterback, the franchise quarterback, the guy that's won you a Super Bowl, the guy who's still a top 5, top 7 quarterback in the league, and looks like he's going to be playing for a lot more years. Maybe not the elite level a couple years ago, but still at a very elite level. Seattle clearly hasn't been known for their trades, as Joe Douglas absolutely fleeced them 2 years ago, and now probably owns some ownership stakes in that franchise, as he completely turned around that franchise and turned them from one of the contending teams to win a Super Bowl to now a rebuilding team. So shout out to Joe Douglas, but at the end of the day, you gave up a top 5, top 7 quarterback. You got 2 firsts, 2 seconds that honestly is not going to get you anything near Russell Wilson or the quarterback that he is. This year they have the ninth pick from the Broncos in a horrible quarterback class. And how good is that Broncos pick going to be now that Russell Wilson's there? It's not going to be good at all. So that's not going to get you a quarterback. The second round picks obviously aren't. They've been good at drafting in years past, but you can't just expect to get lucky with quarterbacks late in the draft every single year. And obviously the players they got, let's be honest, Drew Lock isn't going to be there past this year. If he might, who knows if he's going to make the roster? They just got him just to say they got a quarterback as a replacement, just in case something doesn't work out. He's not going to be there very long. Shelby Harris, great. They got a great locker room guy. Like, that's fantastic. They had a bunch of them, and they released their biggest one in Bobby Wagner. So where does that really stand there with that? When they released their all-time defensive leader and locker room guy in Bobby Wagner and traded another locker room guy on the offensive end in Russell Wilson. And then you got Noah Fant, which is, I guess, a good part of the trade. They got a nice, young, promising tight end. But when you have no quarterbacks to throw on the ball, it really doesn't matter what weapons you have or what tight end you have. So it's going to be interesting to see where Seattle goes from here with the rest of the roster with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and some of these other guys that they have value for if they want to go to a full rebuild, or if they're going to bring in a guy like Teddy Bridgewater or I don't know what other veteran quarterbacks are out there to try to stay viable, but that's going to hurt you in next year's draft with your own draft pick to go for a quarterback in a draft class that's supposed to be a lot better at quarterback. As for the Denver Broncos, I think it's an absolute win. I'm gonna give them an A on this because at the end of the day, they traded for Russell Wilson, like I said, top 5, top 7 quarterback in a division where you absolutely need a quarterback like that to compete. Like I mentioned before when we talk about Aaron Rodgers, like this is a division that you play Patrick Mahomes twice, Justin Herbert twice, Derek Carr twice. You can't be throwing Teddy Bridgewater out there, Drew Lock out there for 17 games a year. Like it's just not going to work out. Doesn't matter how good your running game is. Doesn't matter how good your defense is. You're just not going to be able to compete. So bringing a guy like Russell Wilson gives you more than a puncher's chance. They're definitely going to be competing for that division, if not more, especially with the defense that they have. They didn't lose any real pieces on the offensive end or defensive end. They still got Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy, Javonte Williams. They're most likely going to re-sign Melvin Gordon. They still have the offensive line intact. Their defense is still elite, and there's rumors that Von Miller could be coming back. Like that team is like ready to take over the Chiefs or whatever team is on top of that division. So you better watch out for them. As long as Russell Wilson plays at the level he's been playing for the past few years, um, they should be a force to be reckoned with. They gave obviously the 2 firsts, 2 seconds, but it really doesn't matter when you trading for a guy like Russell Wilson. Like with those draft picks, you're looking to draft a guy like Russell Wilson to take over the reins and help you become a contender. So the draft picks really don't matter at the end of the day when you're getting a proven player like Russell Wilson. So the final grades for me is going to be an A for the Broncos, and I'm gonna give the Seahawks a D plus. Let's be
Wow.
Oof.
Seahawks just clearly don't know how to trade or aren't good at trading. Yeah.
Chris, I know you're about to speak here. I, I know. What is your perspective on that? Because normally in these kinds of deals, like if this was an NBA trade, we would be very, very like more nice to the team that made this deal in terms of trading the star player and like getting assets back for the future. But I think I know obviously the NFL is different, but like, what's your perspective there on the connection? Because like in other sports, like this would be a pretty good deal that a team is making.
Yeah, I mean, eh, it's weird because like the Seahawks, they needed to move on from Russ to like actually start the rebuild because these dudes were dry out of picks, just dry. And I don't know, like, I mean, you guys know more than I do, but they got two firsts, which is a start, and the Broncos' first round pick this year isn't that bad. I believe they have the ninth pick.
Yep, right behind their own that the Jets own.
Wait,
They're
was that again, Dean?
right in front of their own pick, but the Jets own it. That's
Okay,
how.
I just had to throw that out there. I
Yeah.
understand, but I mean, look, they have the ninth pick this year, and then after that, I mean, look, it had to have happened, right? It's just we don't know what other deals there have been. I think there was rumors about Washington's offer.
May I give my theory real quick as to
Go ahead,
why?
go ahead, go ahead.
Because I think there's two reasons. I think one, the team didn't want to trade Russ in conference.
Ah, yes.
Because here's the thing. I think Kimberly Martin was the person who I saw that said this, that she thinks there's a outside chance that Seattle could be keeping tabs on the Deshaun Watson situation, and
Hmm.
that they could end up using this extra draft capital they got from the Denver trade to then get Deshaun. So if you're going to trade for Deshaun potentially, you don't want to keep Russ in conference. You'd rather send him away. So that's my first theory. My second, that's what I've heard, and I think it makes sense. My second theory, and this is a personal thing, is that I think because he's married to Sierra, because he's married to Sierra,
Mm-hmm.
like I think Seattle wanted to give him the respect and acquiesce. Like, we're not going to send him all the way to Washington D.C. on the East Coast. We're going to keep him on the western side of the U.S. because he plays in Seattle year round. I'm sure they have a home in California. I'd
Probably.
be shocked if they didn't. Denver is way closer than Washington D.C. You know, geography circle gets the square here, kids. So this is your geographical lesson, and a reminder that in certain situations, the where the wife and spouse wants their man to be pretty much matters in these cases. I wouldn't be surprised if Sierra wanted Russ to stay somewhat on the West Coast, and Russ was just telling the team like, "Yeah, if you send me to Washington, I'm not going there. I'm not going to play for the commies, or excuse me, the Commanders." It wasn't gonna. I had to make the joke. It wouldn't surprise me if that was happening behind the scenes. It just wouldn't. So I think that's the reasoning. They didn't want to keep him in conference if they traded him, and they probably acquiesced like, let's keep you towards the West Coast. Plus, let's be real here. Denver, Colorado, not a bad city to live in. Like, a lot of people
Yeah.
love going to Denver. So granted, he's a couple years away from this, but like, people love retiring in Denver.
For
Like,
certain reasons that we won't mention, but
true, but like, I just feel like Denver is not a bad city. I think Denver's a really nice city, and I think Russell's gonna have a nice time being out there. I think he's gonna have some fun there. So, and it's not like it's a massive weather upgrade like Denver versus Seattle. Kind of the same thing when you think about it. So, I think I think that's ultimately why. I think I wouldn't be surprised if the wifey had something to do with at least maybe Russell's and what his camp wanted.
yeah, I'm pretty sure they spoke to Russell before the trade happened, and he's just like, screw it, because like, yeah, West Coast, close to California, but also it's the Broncos are a good team, right? Like they haven't won in a while, but I think they're with Russ, they're like a good team now, and they have weapons. Like for Seattle, it's my second favorite team. It's just it was hard. It was a hard pill to swallow to see Russell Wilson leave, but they had to. They had to move on. It wasn't working. Um, the divorce is now finalized. I'm assuming that if he's there with, I mean, we won't get, into detail with this because it's for another episode, but I'm assuming with that ninth pick, they might go quarterback just in case. Like, well, we don't know what's going to happen with the Deshaun Watson thing because I think he's on trial tomorrow. We're recording on Thursday. I think Friday, the trial starts for him. I don't know, something like that. But like, his issues still need to be solved. I think there might be a little bit too much baggage for the Seahawks to kind of bank on and wait on because the draft is coming up, and maybe Malik Willis at 9. And I
There's a
think
deal, guys. By the way, just to interrupt you, there's a baseball deal.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
It actually, oh, wow, it actually broke during the podcast.
what is it?
It's
Yeah.
just
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the details, but they
Hold
reached
on,
a deal.
I got the tweet. I got the tweet from Jeff Passan breaking. Major League Baseball and the MLB Players Association have reached a tentative agreement on a new labor deal. Sources tell ESPN. While it still needs to be ratified by both parties, that is expected to be a formality, and when it is, baseball is back.
Thank Christ, bro. Oh, gentlemen. All right, fuck football. MLB, rejoice. Yeah, Seahawks lost the trade, but I mean, I don't know. I don't hate the package that they got. MLB's back. MLB's back, fellas. Final comments to cap this episode off regarding MLB lockout being over.
Hmm.
I'm
Well,
not setting any expectations for me and my fandom of my Yankees, but expect if you're into baseball like that and you're into the off season, which I am, other than me being a Yankee fan, tonight if the deal's really like locked down, tonight and tomorrow is gonna be crazy with the trades and free agency is gonna go nuts because
yeah.
players are gonna report to spring training and tomorrow starting tomorrow, and by the 13th they're gonna be expected all mandatorily expected to be at spring training. So tonight and tomorrow is going to be nuts with the free agency and the moves and everything like that. So keep an eye on that.
Nice.
Yeah, Dame brings up a good point because remember, not all the main free agents were signed come when the lockout first began, and trades also needed to occur as well. So I think this is absolutely massive. I hate the fact that they're putting a deadline now on when to report because all these deals need to be made. Guys need to get situated. They need to find living spaces. I like but I guess the players are just willing to deal with it. Like, okay, we can deal with it. Let's just get baseball back. Let's just start making money. Obviously they canceled the first couple series. This was mainly done because they didn't want to cancel any more games. So we're gonna get, assuming this all stands, which probably will, according to the information we have. Majority of the teams will still be able to play most of the season. Probably like what 155 games or so, Dame, somewhere around there, like 155 plus. So I
No,
mean, I think
the deal.
that's the
The
good thing.
deal being done today is to play a full 162.
Really? Oh, okay.
They're gonna extend the season by a few days, and they're gonna have double headers and off days. They're gonna make up the games.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, let's go. Okay, then that's perfect. Then all right. I didn't see that part of the tweet that I read, so that's awesome. Okay, baseball, good for them. Honestly, they needed some good news. They needed something like this to happen, and thankfully for all of us, we have something to talk about. Because let's be real here, boys. Like once we're in the dog days of summer, when the NHL and NBA are kind of done the off season, and the NFL we're waiting for the regular season. Because let's be real here, training camp and preseason doesn't really mean damn all. We need baseball. We need the playoff race come the end of the summer months. So that's a big thing for us. So it's a W all around, and for baseball fans, baseball is not dead, and I think that's the biggest W to take from the news that just broke.
Yeah, yeah. To cap it off, this is step one in the path to the Mets championship. All right, guys, a tremendous week this week. Just breaking news everywhere. Just anarchy everywhere, but we love it because we talk about it. It's content, and we need content because that gets viewers. Wow, what an episode, fellas! Awesome job as always. Jurg, where can they find us on the socials?
I mean, guys, you already know you can follow us at somewhat.sports for all information you need. The link to the YouTube is in there. Link to something else could be up there soon. We have a big announcement in the works here. We've been teasing it for a little bit. We actually have to figure things out. We need to get a structure in place. We need to solve everything. But very soon here, we have big news that's going to be really good for the podcast. And we appreciate all you that have joined us so far. Continue to join us. Comment, subscribe to the YouTube, comment on the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and like our post, follow us on IG, spread it to your friends. This is the premier sports podcast that is growing, and I think 2022, ladies and gentlemen, is the year where we really start to make headway in this beautiful media world. And we hope all of you can come with us on this journey.
Beautifully said as always, Jurg. Beautifully said. Yep. Well, what a week. We'll be back next week. As always, we're here. Dame will be going to California soon, so he's kind of informing us about his paid time off already, his PTO. But when we get there, we'll get there. So Jurg and Dame, beautiful job as always. I appreciate you guys. To all the listeners that have listened for this entire hour, we appreciate the hell out of you. And until next time, peace.